from Tucson, Arizona.
Sorry, I just
That's
realized that I
okay.
didn't hit it. So Ashley, reset. If you can start again. Thank you. And
Got
I'm
it.
going to
Got
read
it.
the Firme Role Model. Thank you, Ashley.
All right. Hi, everyone. Again, hi. My name is Ashley Summerset, and thank you, Yusena, for letting me join you guys today. So, just some background about myself. So, I am actually originally from Tucson, Arizona, and I moved to Merced in 2019 after I got my position here at the University of California, Merced. My current job title is a game operations manager for recreation and athletics. And I get a lot. What do you do? So really, I'm in charge of organizing all of our home athletic games for athletics, and that includes setting up ticketing and concessions for our fans, coordinating with our visiting team and officials to make sure they make it onto our campus safely and have everything that they need, setting up our facilities for those games. And then I also collaborate with other student groups or departments or the Merced community, anybody that would like to use our athletic facilities. So, our recreation gyms, our basketball courts, tennis courts. Now we have a pool. So, anyone that wants to use our facilities for any of their events, I'm also the person that helps them organize those. A little bit about how I got to Merced. So, I graduated from the University of Arizona in 2018. When I started in college, I actually wanted to be a sports journalist. You'll start to get this little trend with me in that I love sports. So everything has been really centered around sports for me. But while in college, I ended up changing my major after my sophomore year, from journalism to communication. I just figured journalism, after taking a semester or two of classes, wasn't really exactly what I was looking for. And so I switched to communication because it was, same area, kind of general major. Because at that point, I was like, well, I don't know what I want to do now. All I know is I wanted to be in sports, but I don't know what yet. And it wasn't until the end of my junior year that I realized that I wanted to work in event management. I had a presenter from our athletics department at my university come in and give a little presentation about what she does in events. And it was at that time I was like, that's it. That's exactly what I want to do. So, like I said, I didn't realize that to the end of my junior year. And so I'm like, one more year of college to figure out my whole life. This is not going to work. So I ended up staying for 5 years instead of four. And I ended up getting an internship with the same person who gave a presentation about event management and athletics. So I worked with Arizona Athletics for about 2 years before I graduated. And then right after I graduated, I didn't have a job right away. I was applying everywhere to a bunch of different universities because I wanted to work in sports. And I ended up getting an internship with the Fiesta Bowl, which is a college football bowl game, one of the big ones that happens in Phoenix, Arizona. And I got to intern with them for 6 months. And during my internship there is how I applied here to UC Merced, and I got the job here. And so that's how I ended up here. Just quickly, some fun stuff about me too that I like to tell people. So I moved out here with my dog Bentley. He's a Schnauzer Poodle mix, a schnoodle, and he is currently asleep on my feet right now. And then aside from sports, which I obviously love, I'm a avid fan of Disney. So I'm very glad to be a little closer to Disneyland than I was before. I love any music from Ariana Grande. She's on my phone screen. And then I also like traveling and eating lots of food. So that's what I do when I'm not working. So that's a little bit about me.
Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate that. And we're going to pass it over to Dennis, and then we will take turns I will take turns asking you the two questions, and then we can take, you know, we can take questions if folks have questions, but I love the fact that I learned about the Disneyland. That's something. I grew up in Southern California, so Disneyland is something that was, kind of in the backyard, and so it's always nice to run into folks that that enjoy Disneyland, and also dogs, because I have two dogs as well. So thank
Yeah.
you.
All right, I guess I'll go next then. Hi, everyone.
Perfect.
So I'm Dennis McIver. Pronouns are he, him, and his, and from UC Riverside. So there we go. Hi. As far as things are concerned, I just wanted to start by saying how grateful I am to have the time to chat with all of you today. And Yesenia is one of the people I feel closest with when it comes to our Council of UC Staff Assemblies delegation. So I'm really glad to have 60 minutes to be able to talk in her presence. So thank you for that. As far as my background is concerned, my role at UCR is I am a university honors counselor. And in the scope of higher education, what that means is I have a caseload of students that I work with across all of UCR's different colleges and schools, talking to them about honors, but also serving as a point of reference for different resources and opportunities, both on and off campus. So in a given day, I may tell students, here's some ways you want to make your application to law school better. Here's some things you want to do related to medical school. Oh, you're having an existential crisis about what you want to do with your life. Let's sit down and start to talk about that. And oftentimes I'll tell them, I'm not the expert, but if you want to start to have the conversation, I can help you. Because many years ago, I was in that same space, which takes us way back to the year 2000. Wow, 20 years ago, but back when I was in college. And similar to Ashley, I actually began also as a communication major and an idea of becoming a television journalist. I talked to all sorts of different people in the industry. I'd gone to journalism camp and I thought, I'm going to be the next Dan Rather or Peter Jennings or something like that. And that lasted all of a semester because I took my first writing class and realized that, wow, this is going to take more work and I'm not sure if I'm in the space where I can do it. So that moved me over to politics. And I decided maybe I'll become an attorney because my stepfather, who I'd grown up with for years, was an attorney too. And I figured it'll just be inherited in the business. We'll just do it that way. Fine. But it turns out that I took a really great course in the introduction to Japanese history, and it blew my mind. And I was so in love with it, and I enjoyed the professor that took it with so much that I ended up taking a minor in history. And I figured I'm just going to work with this professor and keep it moving. And that minor in history became a minor in history and a minor in Asian studies. And so when the time came for me to graduate, I decided to go to graduate school because I thought maybe I'll be a professor. And I ended up doing a master's degree in Asian history. About a year into that, I decided this is cool, but what else could I do? And I found out about this great program at the University of Baltimore that had another master's degree. So I said, yeah, I'm already doing a thesis, but what's another degree? So I ended up working on a second master's in legal and ethical studies with this grandiose idea that I'd become an attorney, but I would also be a professor and I'd be doing all these cool sort of things. And again, that lasted until I started working at a legal nonprofit and I realized how that there are certain trade-offs that come with being an attorney. So for me, I was in the middle of an existential crisis of sorts, thinking, what do I want to do with my life? Because I have these two degrees now, I have this job, but I don't really know what I love and what interests me. And I realized then that higher education really is appealing to me. I don't know where I fit in, but I've always had a good time there. There are all sorts of ways I can create value and do positive things. So my first job was in graduate admissions, and it was at Johns Hopkins University. And there are certain cultural things we will talk about later that presented different challenges, let's just say. But about 2 years in, I went to another university, joined the University System of Maryland, and worked in a records office for 5 years. Became the assistant registrar for scheduling there, managing thousands of courses, and so I had this trajectory. But life came calling, and my wife, who I've been married to by the grace of God for goodness, I think almost 13 years now, decided she wanted to come back home to Riverside. And so we started making those plans and I moved out here. I took my dog, packed him in the car, drove across from the East Coast to here, and I've been here ever since. And I will add that if I passed by UC Merced along the way, I might have found my way there instead, but because I do love the campus. So I came to UCR and I've been there since, starting in the registrar's office and now being a counselor. The thing I've realized is that what I was looking for when it came to being the professor or being the journalist is I wanted to be able to have a presence and make an impact on lives. It didn't really matter so much to me what it was, but I wanted to be able to positively and affirmatively support people in some ways. So whether it was the news or teaching, that's what I was looking for. And so for me, my current role lets me do that practically every day when I'm working with students, giving them that affirmation, giving them resources. And at the end of the day, when they do what they need to do, telling them, you did great. And so I get to do that every day. And it's a really fulfilling part of my job. But other pieces of it are working with staff too. And that's been a very central piece of what my work has been the last 2 years. And so, president of my campus's staff assembly, I'm also a past chair of my campus's Black Faculty and Staff Association. I've formed a system group with some other people for different Black staff members in the University of California system entirely. And so I'm able to feed both of those needs that I have when it comes to uplifting and affirming people. And so that's been good. Outside of that, fun facts about me is that when I'm not doing these things, I am an avid gamer. Love video games, dating back to when I was playing the Nintendo 8-bit. Don't try doing that now. You might find it difficult, but that's one of my favorite things. And outside of that, I think my other big hobby now is just learning new things. I in a given week I may learn gardening or work on woodworking. We just bought a candle making kit that I'm really excited to break into. But I love learning. I love being in that environment where I'm constantly challenged, and I think that's why higher education was so intriguing to me. So that's me.
Perfect. Every time I connect with you, I learn something new, especially the candle. I love candles. For a short time, I was making candles as well. And just, I always forget about the gamer part, but then I see your chair is a gamer chair. So it reminds me that that is something that you enjoy. And I appreciate you just bringing in, again, sharing your history with us. And I appreciate the collaboration and working with you. And your passion for advocacy to move forward the issues of equity and diversity within the UC system is, I think, something that I really appreciate that you do, Dennis. And so I'm going to pose this question to you first, and then Ashley, if you can answer in regards to how does your cultural background influence your career? Anything that you can share with students, staff, and folks that identify as folks of color, specifically Black folks that are in this field, anything that you would like to share in regards to how does your cultural background influence your career?
I thought it was a really thoughtful question. So I really appreciated that being posed. And in thinking about it, the thing I would say is that the culture has certainly influenced my career, but it also influenced my experiences dating back to when I was in high school. Because before all of these things happened, I was a 14-year-old kid from Northeast Baltimore who was going to a predominantly white institution for high school that was very well to do. And so in those environments, my who I am and my culture became more highlighted just because of the fact that I was different than other folks. And so my culture influences me a lot because in many cases I may be the only person of color in the room, or I may be the only Black person in the room. And in many cases, I may be the only Black male in the room. So it's trying to be sensitive to that, trying to make sure that I kind of relay certain considerations related to the Black experience where I can, but while also not taking on that role of being the black representative, because I think that's a real trap that sometimes comes with those spaces. Beyond that, for me, another important piece of my culture is uplifting and supporting those that came before me, that are coming after me. Because oftentimes in these environments, if you're the first person, then I think there's a responsibility to make sure you hold the door open for the second, the third, and the fourth. And when I was in high school, I had someone like that. His name was Mr. Boyce. He went to the same high school as me. He was one of the first groups of people that actually integrated the school, and he watched out for me a lot. And so as I got older, I made sure to return the favor. And when I was in college, it was very much the same thing where we had three different Black administrators who watched out for Black students there. And so I tried to make sure I returned the favor to students as well. And now that I'm moving farther along into my career, I feel that responsibility more than ever. And one point I make to folks often is that for staff assembly, I'm the first Black male president, but it's my responsibility to make sure that I'm not the last. And so it's for me, that point of helping and uplifting and supporting others, that's a really prominent feature. And then I think the last one for me is, from a cultural standpoint, it's also important to elevate Black voices and voices of people of color wherever possible. And I would also say, for the purposes of inclusion, that also includes our voices of those with disabilities, our LGBTQIA brothers and sisters. And so I've tried to find every opportunity to give that support as well. And also to continue to learn, because there's a lot of things I still don't know, but it's incumbent on me to try to continue to be educated. So all that to say, that's prompted a lot of the programming that we try to do to make sure those voices happen. As a matter of fact, we started a speaker series with the Black Faculty and Staff Association, where we bring different folks in higher ed to talk about what it is to be Black in this environment. So I think, so if I had to summarize, that's a big part of it, is trying to be the representative where appropriate, but also uplifting the future generation and elevating voices wherever I can.
Thank you, spot on. I appreciate just your ability to also focus it on inclusivity, right? Because one thing is that people just have this misconception of the fact that folks are in silos, or that there's no intersections. But it is something that it's important that that you're doing that work to really encourage inclusivity through all different levels. And so I ask you, Ashley, in regards to how does your cultural background influence your career? Anything that you can share with us in regards to how it's impact or influence your career? So I'll give it to you.
Yeah, sure. So again, I also too really appreciate this question, and I kind of had to sit with it for a little bit and think about kind of what direction I wanted to go with this. So like I said, around me, you're going to hear a lot about sports. And I think sports in itself is its own type of culture. But sports culture is also very integrated with Black culture and, people of color really having a prominent space in sports. I think for myself, I was an athlete all the way up until high school, but I did not have that athletic ability that was going to take me into college. So I wasn't going to, go on and play college basketball. I wasn't trying to get in the WNBA like pretty early on. But there's so many Black role models that you see in sports, which is really good because they're great role models. But sometimes it falls on being kind of stereotypical. Oh, you're a tall Black male, so you have to play basketball. Like that's the only direction that you can take in this society. And sports teaches you so many good things: teamwork, having a hard work ethic, having good competition. There's nothing wrong with that. So I wanted to break that kind of stereotype role for people who go on to play collegiate athletics. College, there's so many opportunities. And for a lot of Black individuals, the only way to get into college is sometimes through an athletic scholarship. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I also want to be that person to tell them that that doesn't have to define you um, while you're in college. If you enjoy playing basketball, if you're very, very good at it, and you do have maybe a history or have the potential for that, um, to go professional in your sport, do that if that's what you want. But if playing basketball is how you get into college, but you actually are somebody that's really interested in biology or coding or something, use that opportunity um, to take advantage of that and get your degree in coding, so that that's something that you can do for yourself afterwards. Um, I think about too back my dad is really the one that kind of introduced me into sports. I always joke about this. I was 2 weeks old when I went to my first football game with my dad. But he started off too in the Boys and Girls Club, another place where young boys and girls of color have somewhere to go after school. Prominent for them to have a space where they could put their energy into other things around their community that might not be the best for them. And so sports is a great place for boys and girls of color to come in. And really for me, it's like wanting to push that as their opportunity to excel and do whatever they want if they don't want to stay in that. Also, kind of echoing what Dennis said, it's another space where people of color feel a little more free to speak out about social justice issues. Especially nowadays, it's really kind of intertwined at this point. And I am grateful to have that platform, and to help others also have that platform, to speak about those issues because it's very important. And I think that that is kind of where the culture really comes to light in sports too, is giving these Black student athletes a space to really celebrate their talent, but also where they come from, and to explain to other people that they're more about their community at home and who raised them and stuff like that. And so that's kind of where I took it when I was thinking about this question, and kind of where I am and why I'm here with my career.
So I'm gonna go a little rogue and ask a question because you all are sharing a lot of great information, uh, a lot on optimism and also about a lot of work and uplifting others and motivating others. So my question is, the other question I have is going to be on what advice you give folks, but I want us to sit in the space of everything that's happening in our world right now, in our nation. What do you, as someone who identifies as a Black individual here, how do you take care of yourself, or what is it that you do to keep engaged, to keep motivated? Because I think that's key right now, especially that a lot of young college students are expressing issues with mental health, expressing fatigue. So you, as professionals and as role models, what are what's something that you do right now in order to kind of navigate a lot of what's happening around us? How do you navigate coming into work, or joining a Zoom meeting and knowing that there's a lot of civil unrest, or there's a lot of things that are happening? So I'll pose it up to whoever wants to answer that question.
Okay, I can start with that one, and I appreciate the fact that you brought that up, because it is true that in general, the last few years, but in particular this year, this past 12 months has really taken its toll for a lot of reasons. And I think the ongoing joke about 2020 was that it was 1919 and the civil rights years all colliding in a few glorious months. And I think that was largely correct. And it did take a toll. I found for myself that the action in the face of inaction is something that empowers me. So if there is a problem, the way I gain energy is by doing something to start to solve it. I have my moments like everyone else where it's frustrating, and like many people of color, even when it comes to things related to the police, certainly I've never had my own dealings, but it doesn't mean that if I hear sirens, I don't feel the goosebumps that a lot of people feel. So I want to make sure we start by acknowledging that. But on the other hand, I also realize that, at least for myself, I'm in a position where I have a certain degree of influence, and so it's important to me to try to use it to do something. And that was part of the thing that for us prompted us to start to get engaged when it came to working with different Black leaders throughout the UC. And that started just as a random discussion, and that moment in history made us think it needs to be more than this. And so that's the work that has started to happen. And so I'm really thankful I've had people like Yesenia, and also my friend Sharon out at UC Berkeley, who have been willing to kind of do that work with me. So that's one piece of it. I think having your support network is very important too. You have to have people that you can candidly talk to and be vulnerable with, because vulnerability is another thing I think a lot of professionals struggle with, because we're taught often, we've seen this, never let anyone see you sweat, right? Where you have to be on your A game all the time, and the truth is that's not possible. So it's good to have those environments where you can safely sit down and be upset or frustrated or downright scared. And so I spend a lot of time with folks like that where I can sort of express those feelings, but also trying to give that same support to other folks who I think feel the same way. That's really important to me too, because yeah, I have those moments, but I've got a whole network of people who are kind of in that same space. So a big part of what I do to deal with it is make sure that my colleagues and the people I look up to are okay. So in a given day, I'll email a few folks and just say, I just want to make sure you're good. All this aside, are you okay? And I think that's important too, because sometimes we lose sight of that because we're in our own world and we're dealing with our own emotions. But being able to move things forward and also being able to give that support and receive it, I think is important. So that's helped me out over the last year.
Thank you. And I can also just quick thing, you check in on me and I appreciate that. So I think not only are you doing, you're saying it, but you're doing the walk. So I do want to just acknowledge that you're a true role model. And so Ashley, what is it that you do? So thank you, Dennis. And then what is it, Ashley, that you do to feel uplifted or to motivate you with what's happening in our current state in regards to, again, nationally, but also worldwide, right? It's something that's, having there's just a lot of civil unrest happening. So can you share a little bit about what influences you to keep moving forward?
Yeah, of course. I want to agree with Dennis too about having that support system. So first and foremost for me, I'm a big talker. I like to talk things out. So when I see things going on, the first people I call are my parents. And I'm like, oh, I just gotta talk my feelings out about this. So really having that important support system. I have an amazing supervisor in my department that she is great on checking in on me, and she's also willing to have those conversations with me. So that's great, having that support. It really helps me pick myself up because I also want to be that support for others. Something that was really cool that happened in our department was over the summer before we came back to school. A lot of our student athletes had posted themselves on social media participating in the protests that were going on. And it really highlighted, oh, I'm so sorry. There's someone doing yard work outside. But anyways, it really highlighted the how much our student athletes actually cared. It made me aware of how many of our student athletes want to actually participate in social justice work. And so I really kind of felt motivated by them to provide them that space. So we started um, our own kind of committee in recreation and athletics called Bobcats for Equity and Social Justice. And we've been working with our student athletes and also our student employees to give them a space to participate in social justice ways. And just seeing students participate and how many people actually care really motivates you to also be one of those people participating. So yes, sometimes it can feel like really heavy on your shoulders. You can feel weighted down by it. But you really got to put yourself in that mindset that it's way more worth it where we could be, where we will end up eventually, as long as we keep putting in the work for it.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you for the work that you are doing with the student athletes, because again, that goes back to making sure that one of the points of opening of the door and keeping it open for the rest of the folks, right? This is you really laying that foundation as well, which is, I think, really significant, because this is when you're influencing them for how they're going to be in their future careers, once they leave. If they continue with sports, great. But if not, you're laying that great foundation in regards to engagement, that civic engagement, which is important. So the question that I have for you all is going to be kind of similar to what we talked about right now, but more specific, what advice would you give yourself if you were still in college? Like now, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give yourself if you could talk to Ashley, you know, the 19-year-old? What advice would the Ashley of today give? So we'll start off with you, Ashley. What advice would you give to yourself at 19, maybe 19 when you were starting off college? What tips would you give yourself for advice?
Something Dennis said earlier during his bio that I really liked is that he's a learner, that he still likes learning. And while I was in college, I was one of those students that was like more of, I got to pass this test, get a good grade type of student, where I kind of missed out on some, you know, really cool subjects that I could have participated in. So right off the bat, one of the advice that came to my head was take classes that you're actually interested in. And it doesn't have to be necessarily like a part of your major, but you know, we all have these gen eds that we have to take and stuff. So if you're a bio major, but you're also really interested in, you know, history, or you're really interested in English literature, like take those classes and pay attention, because it's going to make your college experience more worth it. Right now that I'm out of college, I think about things that I want to teach myself, and it gets a little bit harder when you are have a profession and you have to go to work and then come home and have to deal with whatever you need to deal with at home to actually sit down and take an actual class. So that was some advice that I would have given myself back then. One of the things today that I really wish I knew how to do was something like coding. It would be great if I could create the next great app, sell it, you know, for a couple $1 million and then be good to go type of thing. Um, but anywhere you can turn an experience into a learning experience and something that you really like, do that. Because also while you're in college, that's the time for you to experiment with anything and everything. You may think what you may think you know what you want to do now, but that might change in a couple of years. Or you might be presented with another opportunity and you might realize that is actually something you really loved, but you didn't know it. So use college as that time to experience as much as you can, meet as many people as you can, go to your school events, join clubs, do as many things as you can, spend time on your schoolwork, but also, you know, branch out, meet new people. I think both myself and Dennis in our um, introductions talked about like one person or that we had met in our journey that kind of pushed us in a direction that now we're kind of where we are now because we met that person. So think about that every time you're meeting somebody new.
No, I think one of the things right now when you mentioned that about that one person, right? And I think also you, Ashley, you mentioned about your relationship with your parents. I have a phenomenal relationship with my parents that I have to this day. You know, if I'm having a bad day, I will call my mom and say, "Can you just tell me something nice about me? Because I had a terrible day," right? And so that is something I think that maybe it transcends within different cultures because of the fact that, you know, the family component is something that's really significant, right? Having relationships, connections is important, and that one person can really make a difference in influencing us. So I appreciate you sharing your story and then reminding us about, you know, those connections, right? And also about the importance of us to try things or to participate and engage, because sometimes I think we're so focused on other things that we forget that college is a place to really get engaged and know more about what is out there, right? So that's beautiful advice that I bet Ashley at 19 would have loved to hear. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to pose that question to you, Dennis, in regards to what advice would you give to yourself if you were still in college, maybe 19 or 20 years old as well?
Okay, well, going back to all of those years ago. I don't like to think about how long ago it was, but the first one that comes to mind is it's really simple. It's do the work. And the reason why is because there are all sorts of opportunities that are available, but I think the way I like make the point to my students is when you start in college, every possible door in the world is open to you from that first day. But based off of the decisions you make, doors start to close. And suddenly, that Phi Beta Kappa, for example, or the academic distinction, at a certain point, your GPA gets too low, it closes to you. If you want to go abroad, if your GPA gets too low, that door closes. But I think putting in the work and being unafraid of it is a way to keep a lot of those doors open for yourself. So I think Dennis at 19 didn't quite get that at different points in his career. Still made it out and still turned out okay. But I think if he'd been willing to do a little more work, then maybe other doors would have been open. Another thing that comes to mind that I wish I had heard was that the your goals and who you are as a person and what matters to you is likely to be subject to some change, and that can cause a little bit of dissonance in your mind just because this is who I built myself around being. What am I going to do now? And I guess the advice I give myself is be okay with that. Make peace with it, because it doesn't mean that it was a bad thing. It doesn't mean you made a mistake. It just means you found something that was more suitable for you. And it's okay to kind of lean into it and run with it for a little while. And so for me, it would have been good for me to have heard that. The last piece that I would say is keep your ear, your hearts, and your door open for other people, because there are a lot of folks who will need your support, especially as you move through your career, and you want to make sure you give that give yourself to them so that way they're able to get that support. Because like I said, make sure you want to leave the door open for the next generation and next group of people. So I think that's a really important piece as well.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And again, it goes back to there was a comment that someone mentioned in regards that I think kind of for me, your last comment about, individuals and connections, right? The best part of knowing you're not alone, that there's someone that pays attention and cares, and the satisfaction of knowing we made a change in someone's life. Yuvia just put that into the chat, and I think is something about really allowing ourselves to be open to connect with one another, right? Um, so thank you both for answering the two questions that I have, or the three questions that I posed to you. Itzel has a question in the chat, which is there anything you wish you had done in college that you didn't or couldn't do? So I'm not sure. So I'll pose it to you, Dennis, and then you, Ashley. How's that?
Okay. I think the one thing that stands out to me is that I wish I had spent at least more time doing an abroad experience. I did manage to go abroad as part of a service mission in El Salvador, and that was a really positive, really transformative experience. But I think I would have gained a lot if I had done a summer experience, or even if I had done a couple of weeks of it, just to get more of a worldly feel. I think it would have paired very well with where I was headed long term anyway. So that's something that I wish I had done. But as far as the other things in Canada, I think I did pretty much everything I could have done over my 4 years. So I'm otherwise pretty good.
Thank you. Thank you. I actually did a summer abroad to Costa Rica when I was in a community college, because I was in a very traditional student. I did, and it did make a difference to do it. So I'm always encouraging people, like, do study abroads for a semester or a summer, so you get that global perspective, right? Because we're actually really, our lives are really this little compared to how big the world is. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I think that's a good tip for our students. So thank you. Ashley.
Yeah, so I know it might sound like I'm repeating, but study abroad is something that I didn't do in college. And so that was something that I always thought about doing but didn't do. So if you have the ability, because I completely understand, mine was more of like the ability to actually do it. So if you do really consider it, I think that's a good idea. Kind of like Dennis, there was a lot of things that I did in college. For me, it wasn't the fact that I didn't do them. It was more of that I did them later in college. And so I wish I had that experience the whole time that I was there. And that was joining a group of people that also love sports like I did. And I did that late in college, and that just happened to be like a fun time. During my internship, joining professional groups to kind of network more, did that a little bit later. So um, just because you're a freshman doesn't mean that it's not time for you to start putting your name out there already. Like, get on top of that right away.
Perfect. Thank you. So it says that she says thank you. She put that in the chat. Um, so the other question is, what advice would you give a young professional who may be experiencing imposter syndrome? So I will pose that to you. I'm not sure who wants to take that one on first.
Oh, I could start with that one.
Okay.
I'm real experienced with that one.
Yeah, I think you'll get good answers from both of us on that.
Okay, sounds good. We'll go with Dennis and then you, Ashley. Thank you.
Well, I think the first thing that I would say is that it's fairly common, and I had my own instances of it, and it didn't help that with, as I alluded to earlier, one of my first jobs, I was in an environment that was, I thought, to a degree, very hostile, especially as it related to being the only person of color in the room. And at first, I didn't know where that came from, but then my wife, who's always been really supportive, has said, I think there's something else going on here. And so I think there's sometimes external factors that can influence it, and that can lead it to taking a toll on you. And I have a lot of people, both in my history at UCR, but also my history of higher education, who have felt that burn from it. And so I think it's important to start by saying that sometimes it's just the environment you're in that can make that much worse. The important thing to start by realizing is that you have power. You have a voice that is valued and appreciated. If you are a young professional and if you've gotten to this point, it's because you've earned it. And so you don't want to discredit yourself by wondering whether or not you deserve to be there, because you do. As far as those feelings, it's also understanding that when it comes to these things, a big part of imposter syndrome, this is all theory and I'm not a professor, so it's just based off of experience, but sometimes I found that it comes just because of the lack of experience. And a big part of experience I found comes from learning, and a lot of learning comes from mistakes. So you have to be okay with that. That's where having a trusted and supportive network to give you that guidance and honest feedback becomes really important, because I'm still getting it today. I have a couple of folks that I talk to pretty much daily who give me solid feedback on terms of, here's what you did, here's how I would fix it. And I value every minute of that I get, because it's all a learning process. So if you're feeling like it's an imposter syndrome, ask yourself, is it that, or is it because I just don't feel the experience? Because you're going to get the experience. You just want to make sure you have that support structure in place to do it so you can continue to build safely. But more than anything, just know the fact that you've earned your position. And on some level, you have every right to be there just as much as the person that's holding the high level position. So don't discredit yourself. One thing I tell my students often is, the people, the world around you, it's going to be on them to make their decision. Don't discount yourself. It's you need to walk in and have as much confidence in you as possible, because you can't do anything about them, but you have a lot of control and power over what you do. So claim it. Don't be afraid to either. And if you need an affirmation, you can always email me and I'll send you some good words. But just know that you are valued, that your voice does matter, and don't be afraid to take advantage of it.
Thank you. Very powerful. I appreciate that. Ashley.
Yeah. So I will say that I think I am currently in the middle of experiencing imposter syndrome. Because I am somebody that I'm in my job role at a very young age. I'm the youngest in our department. So there's it's not constantly, but there will be certain times where it pops up like, do I actually know what I'm doing? And then also, I am a woman who is trying to work in sports, which is a highly male dominated industry. So there's looking at it from those two angles. I think if you're somebody who's also, like in a STEM field, you might experience that as well, being maybe one of the only women in the room in that sense. So some things that I do for myself is because imposter syndrome is a lot of how you are attributing your skills to yourself and what you think everybody else around thinks of you, even if it's not, even if you've never been told it before, or so it's a lot of internal thought. And so what I like to do is if I have a project, I like to set some like benchmark goals for myself. And as I reach those goals, I like to tell myself, see, you did it because you know what you're doing. And constantly reminding myself that I know what I'm doing. I'm good at my job. They hired me for this job because I'm qualified for this job. It's kind of like when people tell you, if you recite these affirmations to yourself every day, it'll make you feel better about yourself. Well, that's the same thing. Telling myself every day that I'm really good at my job. And that helps a lot. Also, like Dennis said, having that support system. So if you have a boss, luckily I've had my direct boss has always been a female as I've been working through sports, which has been huge for me, because we kind of experience the same microaggressions working in our industry. So I have someone that I can go to kind of talk about situations that may have happened and how it's playing in my head. And then she can tell me that's not what it means, or you're totally justified in your feelings, but you're way better than that. It's really important that you find that person. It doesn't have to be your direct boss or anything like that, but if you find the person that really knows who you are, and can affirm those things in you, that helps as well.
Perfect. I appreciate that. One thing that reminded me, both of what you were saying is there's a quote that I just picked up on Rosa Parks that said, "I had no idea the history was being made. I was just tired of giving up." Reminds me of imposter syndrome. Sometimes is, you know, the fact that we're constantly in the struggle, right? Especially I think as folks of color, we're constantly struggling with so many things, and it gets to a point where it is very tiring, and that's where we get overwhelmed with that imposter syndrome coming in, right? But yet we're in the space where we are making differences, and really, like, you all are making huge differences in the lives of students every day, but yet we still are struggling sometimes with this imposter syndrome, right? But it's really about, again, saying that we can overcome it, we can move forward. But it's relying on folks from the past to get those motivations from those role models, those people that have crossed your paths, which I think is beautiful that you were able to honor them. Probably years ago, they themselves didn't know that they were going to have such an impact on you, right? But here now, today, you're still sharing what they left inside of you, right? They planted that seed, and now we're seeing the flourishment. We're seeing those, cultivating what they were able to plant, and you all are doing that as well. So I know, I'm not sure if we have any other questions, but we have about 5 minutes. Any closing remarks? Oh, actually, we do have. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, we just have. Folks are appreciating. Thank you, Yesenia, Dennis, and Ashley. I needed this talk, especially about imposter syndrome. So thank you, Crystal. But any other thoughts that you have that you would like to share? Because one of the things that I have on my background here that you can see is celebrating Black History Month. But I think it's also important celebrating Black history and culture all year round, because I also do feel that as folks of color, as collaborators in this work, we really have to get us beyond that 1 month, right? Constantly celebrating each other. So what's something that, you feel that is important for us to prioritize for February and on, or what's something that we can, keep moving forward to really uplift the Black voices, right? Because I think that's really significant. Anything else that you would like to share with us? And I know that Daniel put on here also just another quick thing. I just want to make sure I read it. What advice would you give a young professional who may be experiencing microaggressions? How do I help my students? Oh, maybe that might be a good, maybe if you all can answer that question. And then if we have time, if you can answer the question that I mentioned about uplifting Black voices or anything related to what we can do to learn and continue to motivate each other. So the question from Daniel again, what advice would you give a young professional who may be experiencing microaggressions? How do I help my students? Great question.
All right, this is a mouthful, but I'll give it my best. As far as the uplifting voices, I appreciate that you said that, and it's all about education, and it shouldn't just be restricted to a couple of weeks out of the year. That's one of the reasons why for the event that the Black Faculty and Staff Association is holding next Thursday with the Assistant Provost Michael Brown, that was one of the reasons I intentionally said we're not going to put that in Black History Month, because this is an important conversation and it doesn't matter when it happens, but it needs to take place. So this is why we get along, because we see eye to eye on these things. But I think it's looking for every opportunity to plug those learning experiences into your day-to-day life. I'm constantly being bombarded with all these different cool ways to talk and engage and learn about all sorts of groups and cultures. In fact, one of the things that I'm doing next month for staff assembly is going to be Women's History Month, and I thought this is cool. Because we do trivia every month on our campus. I host it, and I said we're going to make this one Women's History Month themed, and I'm so excited because it's going to give me this chance to learn all these cool things that I haven't really had a chance to be exposed to. So I think it's being around the type of community that's going to encourage and nurture that growth and is going to constantly push you to continue to go outside of your horizons. And so I've been really thankful to have that. As far as the microaggressions piece, I think that for many professional workers of color, that's something that we experience a lot. The thing I've come to realize for myself is that in many cases, it's not something that's intentionally posed by folks, but they may not know any better. So I think it's incumbent on us that when we see those moments, is that we find a way to engage them on it and say, well, what prompted you to say that? And I think there's a way that you can constructively and positively have that conversation where you can make it clear that this is why this is why this is problematic. And it's, you can do what you want with this information, but just understand that when you say this is how it looks, and here's some context behind it. A perfect example is when sometimes we have folks that even don't know I guess it would be the etymology behind certain words, and it's being able to say, you do understand the history behind that word, right? Here's a link, and let me know if you have any questions. But being able to engage them and give them a chance to learn from it, so that way you've equipped them with the information to move forward in a positive way. That can be a lot harder when it comes to being a student, because there is privilege involved with folks. And if they're a professor, for example, that makes it a little bit trickier because you want to approach them. But I say, if you're giving them constructive feedback and you're doing it in a positive way, if they choose to take issue with that, that's on them. That's not on you. But know that there are also resources around to help you. Every campus has a diversity, equity, and inclusion office within the UC. Take advantage of those. If you feel like you're alone, then have people like Yesenia to talk to, good advocates who can give you insights on how to navigate it as well. That's all I said. I know it's 3:00 now, but I'm going to hang back. So.
No, thank you. Thank you. I know, at this point I'm here. I want to hear you, Ashley. So I know that we're at 3:00, but if you can, share with us your thoughts, the questions that I asked, whatever you feel like you can answer.
I think Dennis provided some really good resources for people if you have a student that comes to you about experiencing microaggressions, a way to direct them. The only thing else I would add to that is to sometimes just being having someone that they can go to tell them that they've experienced it, and for you to sit there and listen is really all that they need sometimes. So if that's the best that you can do, that's the best that you can do, and it is helpful. As for celebrating Black history past the month of February, there's so many ways to celebrate history. And I think what people lose with Black history sometimes is that it's not just history for Black people. This is history that's happened to the entire world that Black people have been a part of. So if you're going to talk about another point in time of history and during the month of, May, um, you can also find during that point in history in which a Black person was also there. So that's something that you can do anytime, always. I think what's great is that there are other topics that you can talk about, that you can bring up with your students or with your friends or people that you are engaging with that are related to all different types of cultures and backgrounds. And just recognizing that everybody has their own experience is a way that you are celebrating Black history at any time.
Thank you. That's a great segue to ending. It's just that really, again, it's about celebration can happen at any time of the year. And celebration also doesn't have to be focused on one particular area, but it's, taking into account that, Black people have, are woven into all parts and, in areas of our country. It's just not sports. It's just not, this is not that, right? It's something that we oftentimes forget that the Black voice is our voice as Americans, right? And it's something that we have to uplift all voices, but specifically we also have to be intentional of the Black voices, because for a long time they have not been allowed to be celebrated. And so I think this is something that I appreciate you all participating in our Firme Role Model series, and really, again, reminding us that, celebrating Black history and culture all year round is important. And when we can celebrate Black voices, we're going to use different platforms. And I appreciate you all sharing your stories and knowing that it's going to live on our YouTube channel so other folks can learn and benefit from your experiences, because lived experiences are also stories that we need for learning, right? We need to hear people's lived experience, because that's a way for us to relate and to really understand the experience, right? And what it means to live the Black experience within higher education and within our communities and within our families. And so that's something that I do appreciate you all taking the time to share your story and to hopefully plant those seeds. And I know that you are planting those seeds every day. And with this platform, you've left a couple of other seeds. So from the bottom of my heart to your heart, I appreciate you all very much. And I look forward to connecting and continuing to do great work with both of you.
Well,
Any last
thank you.
thoughts?
Thank you for being amazing. And
Yes.
UC Merced is beyond lucky to have you, by the way. I'm saying that publicly because we don't elevate folks enough, but we appreciate having your friendship and all that you do. So it was a pleasure.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm very glad to have met you, Yesenia, through staff assembly this year. And now Dennis.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Hopefully one of these days we can have coffee or lunch and really break bread together, because that's really ultimately what, it's about. Learning is about those intimate conversations and connections. So looking forward to it soon, hopefully in 2022. Well, bye everyone. Thank you again for all your time.
Thank you.
For those of you that joined us today. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.